All right, welcome back to AI for 2021 Finance Summit presented by Data. Next up, we have two awesome speakers from BlackRock. Please join me in welcoming them to the virtual stage.
Thank you. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you to the AI for Finance Summit. Good morning, everyone. We are so excited to be here. My name is Hamdan Azhar, and today I'm joined by Tiffany Perkins-Munn, and we are honored to be representing BlackRock at the AI for Finance Summit. We're really excited to hear all of the great presentations today. So just by way of quick introduction, Tiffany is a managing director at BlackRock, and she leads the global marketing RAD team, because we're RAD, stands for Research, Analytics, and Data. It's a firm-wide center of excellence dedicated to advancing the firm's strategic growth priorities using research, analytics, and data. Tiffany has had a storied career spanning 20 years using data to drive decision-making in financial services, including at Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, Citadel Securities, and JP Morgan. My name is Hamdan Azhar, and I'm a vice president at BlackRock, and I lead the data science pillar of Tiffany's team. I joined BlackRock last year after having worked in data science at Facebook, Graph Science, and Prismoji. Today, we'll be talking about some of the work we're doing at BlackRock in using data science and analytics to understand our clients and drive decision-making. Like many of you, we work at a large, complicated organization that has many different moving parts across different businesses, products, and regions. Historically, these parts have often worked in isolation from each other. Our team was formed a few years ago to foster greater collaboration and sharing of best practices across the firm to really drive a more data-driven culture so that our clients can have a more connected experience across all of their touch points with the firm. Data science plays a major role in that transformation. And in order for that to be effective, not only do we need to stitch all of our data together, we need to find compelling insights in that data, we need to drive business impact, and we need to take those insights to our stakeholders in a way they can understand and actually implement and use that to improve whatever they've been doing in the past. Throughout this journey, we've experimented with many different tools, technologies, and techniques. Today, we'll be walking you through 5 specific examples of how data can have impact in your business, and that hopefully you can apply in your work as well. Tiffany?
Yeah, thank you, Hamdan. So just a bit of background on me. I've been in the business for close to 20 years, basically in the industry. I have an interdisciplinary PhD in psychology and advanced quantitative methods. It sounds pretty fancy, but it just means applied statistics. Basically, how do you apply statistics to the measurement of attitudes and behaviors of different kinds of market participants? The entirety of my career has really been all around research, data, and analytics. A few years ago, when people started calling what we do data science, I was elated because I was like, oh, it's this hot new thing that I've been doing for 20 years. Now back to our talk today, but before we jump into the data, just let me set a bit of context for financial services in general. So if you think about what it means to be data-driven, easy access to data and information, data built into the fabric of decision-making so that every decision uses data, the ability to know clients so well that personalization and, more importantly, personalization at scale is possible. Financial services as an industry and as a whole lags. In fact, within financial services, the farther that you move into like intermediated spaces where your clients are not the end user, but a subgroup of clients like financial advisors, or institutional relationships where you have lots of individuals that you cover at a broader institution, it becomes even more challenging. So if you can picture this spectrum across various industries, financial services is at the bottom. And within financial services, intermediated and institutional spaces are at the bottom. And the reason is really because the further away from the consumer, the more white glove the service becomes, meaning high touch, one-on-one relationships really drive this business. I mean, it's not all bad. The other fact about data within financial service of the industry is that we have 2 types of data. So not only do we have, like, we're sort of lagging behind others in terms of how we're using data. On top of that, we also have multiple types of data. If you think about data as the flip side of a coin, on the one side, there's client data, and on the other side, there's investments data. And in the financial services industry, we are all really good, or better, I should say, at the investments data. That's the data that's used for asset allocation, portfolio construction, et cetera. The other side of the data, the client data, on an individual one-to-one basis, like relationship managers covering clients or sales teams being responsible for a book of clients, we are very good. But that is not what drives business. Really being able to aggregate all of that data to the enterprise level, to understand client at the enterprise level, is what will propel a firm to really be more successful in terms of how they're using data and analytics. And in general, financial services just isn't there yet from a how we cover our client perspective. Like, how do we in aggregate meet our clients where they are, understand what they need, get in front of their needs, be more anticipatory and proactive versus reactive. But if you compare this to a consumer company like Airbnb, that might show you an offer via notification in the app, and you might immediately click through and make a reservation. So that's not our industry, just to give you a comparison. Now, quickly, before we go ahead into the 5 examples that Hamdan mentioned, I want to say that all the data you're about to see is dummy. We've de-identified the data, but it is all based on real live use cases and real business impact. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Tiffany. Now, before we jump into the 5 examples, I just wanted to, set some broader context around how we see the maturity curve as we become a more data-driven, AI-driven organization. These are sort of the, some levels you can imagine along this journey. And what's interesting here is that, in most data science settings, we usually spend a lot of our time talking about what happens at levels 4 and 5. We talk about model building, we talk about deep learning, we talk about, the latest algorithms. And I think the paradox is that we know that, 80% of data science is data cleaning. So we're spending 80% of our time at level 2. But we really, have found that most of the impact that happens, at least in the early stages of an organization, comes from that level 3. It's around, now we have data, we have some understanding of the business. How do we find some key insights that can drive decision making, that can drive behavior in a way that really would not have been possible without data? So those are the steps we'll be focusing on today. And it's also important to note that across our firm, as Tiffany mentioned, there's a wide spectrum of data sophistication on different teams, whether on the investment side, the client side, the sales side, or the risk side. Our experience is in the client side, which is in general in relatively earlier stages of sophistication. So that's what we'll be focusing on. Next slide, please.
Yeah, thanks, Hamdan. So the first example we'll share today is from what Hamdan refers to as level 2. And this is an example from a situation we recently experienced a few months ago. One of our clients came to us and said that they were getting too many emails from asset managers in general. And we said, well, let's take a look and look at the data to make sure we're not part of the problem. And we ended up building what we call the client 360-degree view, which shows us for any given organization at one quick glance, a snapshot of their interactions with us across the entire firm. So if you look at this slide, you see on the top left, our client leads from various businesses and product groups who manage the relationship with the client. And you can see there's no one person. There's the relationship. The relationship management is distributed across various business groups. And on the top right, you see how many contacts we have at this institution, how many opted into emails, for example, and how many opened emails. We can also see the top contacts at this client whom we are engaging with, and at a glance, which channel these clients are most engaged with. So this view actually generated a lot of excitement across the business, because right now, this data is spread across many different databases, each with different front ends and different access protocols. And by bringing all of this data together in one easy to understand view, we've been able to make it accessible and also allow the businesses to derive value from it. But there's so much more here. Like, what else do you see? In the top middle table, where it summarizes email engagement, the data indicates that 4,216 individuals at this client have opted into email. Basically, they said, yes, you can send me email. But we've only targeted 2,147 of those individuals. What does that mean? That means that there are missed opportunities for engagement. Like, we're only reaching out to half of the people who said they were open to email. And what else can this view tell us? Well, if you look at that same table at the very last row, that indicates the maximum number of emails sent to an individual within the 6-month period represented on this page. That number is 238. That's amazing. I mean, that's a lot. No wonder clients complain and aren't responsive to marketing engagement tactics, right? If they're getting that many emails from each of their partners, they really don't have enough time in the day to respond.
Yeah, exactly, Tiffany. And I think the great thing about this is when we make our data accessible like this, we can spottily fix them. Not a real company. Punctuation, some of them had periods. And what we found is that the importance of clean data really shines when we make our data accessible through views like this.
Right. One other thing that we can point out here is that you might think this seems like CRM. Well, the reality is that we have many different CRMs, and for a long time, each business was compartmentalized and did its own thing. But we believe that by making our underlying data more accessible, we can better serve our clients and can better identify synergies and opportunities across the broader enterprise. Next slide, please. So now understanding our engagement with clients is great, it is, but we should also identify key outcome metrics. And there are several outcome metrics that we like to use. One such metric, which you see on this slide, is Net Promoter Score. And I'm just giving a little background for people who probably aren't as familiar with Net Promoter Score. But anyway, Net Promoter Score is used as a strategic management tool for assessing clients' likelihood to recommend us. It's also an indicator of advocacy. Not only will they recommend you to others, but will they advocate on your behalf? It was introduced by Fred Reichheld in his 2003 Harvard Business Review article, and basically it's become one of the key management metrics across industries. It's a single question: how likely are you to recommend a firm to a client or colleague? And it's on a 10-point scale where 0 to 6 are detractors, 7 to 8 are considered passive, and people who give you 9s and 10s, which is where we want to be, are considered promoters. And the scoring is really simple. You subtract the percentage of detractors, those in 0 to 6, from the percentage of promoters, those in 9 to 10. So a score of 0 means you have an equal number of promoters and detractors. And a negative score means you have more detractors than you have promoters. And obviously a positive score means you have more promoters than detractors. And ultimately a score of 0 or higher is considered good. A positive score, like positive 50, is considered excellent, and 70 is world class, which is always obviously what we're aiming for.
Exactly, and I think as we look at something like NPS, it's important to understand what is the reference set we're comparing ourselves to, what is the benchmark, because obviously there are differences by different industries, there are differences between B2B and B2C, but usually, we find B2C is, often has stronger NPS than B2B businesses, even within B2C, right? Like department stores do a lot better. Internet service companies historically did not do that well. But for us, as we think through this, we're comparing ourselves to other investment firms, asset management firms, ETF providers. That is usually the benchmark against we're comparing these metrics and tracking and driving improvement over time.
Yeah, and it's a very important metric because what we've learned is that it's indicative of an important stickiness factor, right? It's the depth of the client relationship. And the more a firm interacts with the client across multiple channels, the more likely that client is to recommend and ultimately advocate for the firm. So the bar chart you see on this page shows you that if you are, this is real data, keep in mind, that if you are interacting with clients on one channel, that they're not that engaged and they're much less likely to recommend you to others. Whereas when we're interacting with them across 5 channels, not only do they have a world-class NPS score, which means that they are more likely to recommend us and advocate for us, but they also become evangelists or ambassadors of sort, which is how you can increase revenue and profitability and engagement. Next slide, please. So this next example we'll share is firmly in what Hamdan would call level 3. And using data to understand behavior and drive decisions is a key tenet to what we, Hamdan and I and our teams, try to do. So as Hamdan has shown, we're pulling together a myriad of different data elements and analyses into a comprehensive view for ease of use. But we also want to help guide our partners on what specifically they should focus on for resource, talent, and budget allocation purposes, right? All of us, I'm sure all of you, only have limited budget, and we want to use that as efficiently as possible, where we're going to get the most return on investment. And one technique that we typically use is illustrated on this page. It's a key driver analysis, and it tells you the relative importance of predictor variables on your outcome variable. And people do this a lot. This isn't, anything new. There are different ways that you can do this. Multiple regression is typical, and it can handle continuous and categorical variables. Logistic regression can be used for binary variables. We chose to use Shapley regression. One of the weaknesses of multiple linear regression is that the importance, which is indicated by beta weights, tends to be overly reliant on the sample data, right? So it's not a stable predictor of the future data, but Shapley value regression is actually based on game theory, and it tends to improve the stability of the estimates from sample to sample. But whichever methodology you decide is right for your data, it still identifies the major variables, or what's called the key drivers, even if the relative importance is less stable. So most importantly, its relative ease of computation and rich history make it the go-to procedure for identifying key drivers. So with an analysis like this, we can start to prioritize. Okay, we have this laundry list of things that we want to do and that we think matter. How can we use analysis to help us organize and rank those, and then determine how we should allocate resources?
Exactly, Tiffany. And I think what's so great about this is that it's so visual. Often in data science, we have the results of a regression or a complicated model, and we struggle to communicate them in a way our stakeholders can understand. Like in grad school, a screenshot from R or Python is usually not the most effective tool in a meeting with with non-technical stakeholders. But here, we're able to visualize the model weights and make it actionable and interpretable. And I think that's what really makes this type of a view so powerful.
Maybe we could walk through a quick example using real data on the next slide. So on this next slide, we have the Shapley value on the y-axis from most to least important. And we have top two box satisfaction on the x-axis from left to right. And this quadrant analysis is another easy way to help partners, who may not understand the mechanics of Shapley value, to identify areas of focus for budget allocation. So in short, variables that are higher on the chart, top to bottom, are more important, and those to the left are underperforming. So on this chart, you may want to focus on those variables in the top left that are important to clients, because those are the ones that are both important and underperforming relative to other types of client engagement. So in this case, focusing on and moving ease of use, troubleshooting, and responsiveness to the right will have the greatest impact on changing the outcome. And so this comes from survey data. And I know a lot of times in surveys where people are asked to state the importance of this factor or that factor, stated importance, by the way, because sometimes we're like, well, we derived importance, and people are like, well, we simply ask people how important it is in the questionnaire. But stated importance is actually never a good idea for the following reason. If I were to ask each of you on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not at all important and 10 being extremely important, to rate the importance of aircraft safety. Everybody in the audience, really, you're going to give it a rating of 9 or 10 mostly, right? But then if I asked you on that same 10-point scale to rate the likelihood that you would check the safety statistics of an aircraft before you fly, we would see the opposite. In this case, the majority does not check airline stats before flying, right? There are always a couple of people in the room who do check, but this is not the majority. So basically what this means is that people's attitudes towards something, like something they think is important and they gave it a high rating, like airline safety, does not necessarily match their behavior. in this case, checking the airline's safety before flying. Therefore, rather than asking stated importance, we should aim to statistically derive importance. That is to let the data, not stated, verbatims, tell us what's important. And that's why this type of analysis, key driver analysis, are really important and effective.
Exactly. Oh, sorry. And next
slide, please. That's okay. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Tiffany, and I love that airline example. I hope we can start flying again soon. So on this slide, we'll talk about how do we learn from client feedback at scale, right? And a tool we use that many of you might use regularly is a survey. At BlackRock, we routinely run surveys across our various businesses and products to ensure that we are as attentive to our client needs and experiences as possible. So earlier this year, we heard that financial advisors were stressed after the outbreak of COVID, and they were dealing with lots of uncertainty around how to deal with market volatility, how to engage with clients remotely, and so forth. So we built a community of financial advisors where we sent them rapid return surveys on topics they wanted to learn more about, so we could share with them how their peers were behaving, and we would send them a summary report, and it was super helpful. We also run many larger scale survey initiatives where we ask our clients about their experience with our products and tools. And often a question is, what do we do with this survey data, right? Like, what is the best way to present this and make this accessible and really make this actionable? So oftentimes the output of a survey is an 80-page PowerPoint deck, right? And it's great if you have time to go through it beginning to end, but often many people don't do that. So we needed something that was quick, that was a one-page at-a-glance summary of what we learned from the survey. And this is what we came up with, right? It's a basic heat map. It might look like you're looking at a genomic sequencing heat map, but it's actually based on survey data. And on the left, from top to bottom, you have each of the variables we asked about in the survey. And then across from left to right, you see the overall values. You see breakdowns by user type, by client segment, by job role, by industry and region. And what the coloring, which is just basic conditional formatting in Excel, allows us to pinpoint is what are the areas we're doing well in, what are the types of variables we're performing well in, what are the types of clients we're performing well in, and what are the areas for improvement. And we thought this was a really powerful way of communicating the results of a large, complicated survey in a quick, easy to understand fashion that our stakeholders could understand. And this ended up having a lot of traction within the firm.
If I could just jump in quickly, Hamdan, I wanted to add something. It's important because one of our goals is not only to make the data accessible, but also to come up with creative ways to help our partners in the firm who don't necessarily speak data and statistics to understand and digest a large body of information easily, and to be able to pull out key themes and patterns. And this is a great example of how to do that. And it's really indicative of the fact that sometimes you don't need really sophisticated and complicated tools and technologies to execute or find important business outcomes. It's just a matter of taking the data, being able to wrangle it, organize it, and utilize it most effectively, and then build visualizations that help partners really understand what they're looking at and how to pull out the meaningful pieces of it. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Tiffany. I think, in closing, what we want to leave you with is that, it's not either or, right? It's not that either we focus on the data quality, the data visualization, making data accessible, or we're running, AI and machine learning and deep learning. I think it's a bit of both at the same time. And I think that's what we found is the best way to think about this, because definitely in this crawl, walk, run stage of building technology and driving change in large organizations, the initial stages can be tedious, they can be effortful, they can be mind-numbing sometimes. And instead of viewing these as being a rigid sequence where now we're crawling and 3 years from now we might be running or flying, we can actually do a lot of this in parallel. And I think that is often necessary to keep the organization inspired, to drive momentum, to ensure that we're constantly hiring the best talent. So for example, in parallel with all of this data visualization, data accessibility work, we're currently building a firm-wide NLP initiative to synthesize insights around text data from all possible sources: social media, digital media, investment filings, client feedback, sales notes, news, newswire data. There's just so much data out there, right? And we're trying to bring it all together and apply NLP technologies on top of that so we can extract the most pressing insights that can drive value for our stakeholders. And we found that is very interesting work that we do in parallel with this foundational work around building a marketing measurement framework, taking our stakeholders along on this journey. And this ensures that we're constantly seeing that light at the end of the tunnel as we crawl, walk, run, and eventually fly.
Perfect. Thank you, Hamdan.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was an awesome presentation, and we really appreciate you sharing these awesome insights with us. Thank you both for sharing. All right, for the audience, it's time for you to make your way to your next session. Along the way, make sure to accept your connection request and visit our awesome AI exhibits. Thanks so much, and we'll see you around.